Tonight, Celia is improving over the eastern Pacific. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for June 23rd. Right now, the only thing that's named and active as a tropical cyclone is Celia, so it's got the whole world eyeing it up right now, and it's got the whole eastern Pacific basin to itself, sort of, although it will encounter hostile conditions fairly soon. Well, later on down its line. Elsewhere, it's quiet. The Atlantic, there's no areas of interest active, and we're not pondering the formation of any over the next 5 days, on day 23 of Atlantic hurricane season. So far, we've had only one tropical storm. I say only because I think some people have expected more by now, but it is an average start. In the eastern Pacific, what's left of Blas, and there really isn't much by this point, are continuing to saunter out over the ocean. Celia is behind it, and slowly getting a little bit stronger, up to 50 miles per hour, although it's not looking that great on satellite imagery, which we'll come to later. In the western Pacific, it still remains very quiet with no areas of interest, but there are signs getting closer and closer that we might see some storm development, and it could be a strong one or two over the next couple of weeks. It is the time when things start to rev up, especially in the first week of July, as history's proven. In the Indian Ocean, though, there's no areas of interest and things are remaining very quiet there. You've got the general windiness over the Arabian Sea. That's starting to rev up a little bit as well. So let's look at the big picture regarding Celia and what's left of Blas on the left hand side, looking very sorry for itself. Celia not looking much better though, unfortunately for it. Dry air has started to encroach near the centre of the storm after wind shear gave its convection a battering, and there really isn't very much deep convection around the storm at all, with its centre partially exposed. Although there are some flaps of convection further north along the coast of Mexico, so we are looking still at some rainfall accumulations. In the Atlantic, this is how it looks right now. A picture of general dryness, but you've got a bit of moisture and a little system there in the open Atlantic Ocean over the Sargasso Sea, and a very disorganized front towards its northwest. Thunderstorms bubbling up over Cuba and the Greater Antilles. Looking into the eastern Pacific, you can see this picture here. Lots of cloudiness over Central America, blowing up little bits of convection, but the main scene there is Celia, which has a very large area of influence, although it is struggling for intensity. Western Pacific looking like this right now, which I'm not sure exactly how it looks because I don't have the latest imagery in front of me. In fact, there is some convection just off the east coast of Luzon, the Philippines, and one or two little dribs and drabs over Micronesia and off the Mariana Islands, but generally a quiet scene across the Westpac. Indian Ocean, you can see how that looks if it doesn't glitch too much. You can see a lot of convection blowing up on the eastern side of the Bay of Bengal. The southern hemisphere as well, still blowing up a few things, but nothing tropical cyclone material. And in the southern hemisphere, a frontal system blowing through New Zealand. There's a lot of them that happen around this time of year. About to reach that area, and a few convective tropical thunderstorms occurring around Vanuatu and towards the southernmost Solomon Islands, but generally a quiet picture. Sea surface temperatures appear to be breaking up a little bit on the 28 degree isotherm in the eastern Pacific. I must say that it is struggling there this year, and it will continue to struggle. The Atlantic, on the other hand, though, is starting to get quite large areas of 30 degrees Celsius waters or higher, particularly off the coast of Louisiana and the rest of the Gulf Coast, well above average, up to 3 degrees above right now, and off the Bahamas there 30 degrees, and the Gulf Stream looking healthy as well. Indian Ocean generally sticking to around 29 to 30 degrees. Philippine region 30 degrees plus around the coast of Luzon. In the Philippine Sea, very warm as well. South China Sea was below average not long ago, but has rebounded quite decently, up to around 28 to 30 degrees Celsius generally, and off the east coast of Taiwan as well. Temperatures really starting to get up there, 29 to 30 degrees Celsius now starting to creep up the east coast. So, sea surface temperature anomalies, what do they tell us? Well, the La Nina effect is still there. Eastern Pacific, just as a general rule, is well below average. The Atlantic, Caribbean is up and down, but the Gulf of Mexico well above average, Gulf Stream above average. It's the subtropical zones of the Atlantic that are a little bit below average, but the tropical zone in general is a little bit above. In the ocean heat content stakes there, you can see that it's starting to increase quite significantly across the whole basin, but that massive loop current in the Gulf of Mexico looking very good. Western Pacific flaring up, of course, as you'd expect. Eastern Pacific, look how drab and dreary that is looking, and it is not getting any better there. Ocean heat content is very low. So what do the computer models make of these storms? This is Celia, and GFS wants it to become a brief or just about scraping hurricane status on a few occasions there actually. Takes it on towards the west there, quite a decent run it gets in the end. But then after that you start to see a new system developing. This is the 5-day period that we're looking at. We've marked this unofficially on our TCOS as a 10%. We'll probably see the National Hurricane Center do that soon. And this is the precipitation. You can see what we're expecting mainly from Celia's influence, and over the mountains of Mexico along the coast there, extending all the way from parts of Oaxaca up towards Nayarit. We're looking at high rainfall totals in some isolated locations of above 6 inches, but in general rainfall will be much lower, especially along the coast where it may only total 1 or 2 inches in most areas. In the longer range, this is what we have in store. Celia, a slow death that continues as it moves westward, and then a small hurricane after that is on tap according to the GFS. Looks like a category 2 there, and a much smaller storm than Celia. We'll see whether that materializes or not. And at the very end of that 10-day period, if you've observed closely, you'll see another system start to develop just as it reaches the eastern Pacific basin off the coast of Nicaragua. So something else that might start developing later on. Western Pacific, 5 to 10 days, you can see this potential typhoon that forms there and gives Taiwan a brush past and into China in the end, still possibly as a typhoon, and then another system behind it, a small system that starts to intensify rather quickly. This is Western Pacific, 5 to 10 days, so it's unknown really whether this will happen or not yet. It is the GFS and it can be clumsy sometimes with these forecasts. Well, that's all the serious stuff done for tonight. You can take a look at the Force 13 store, scan the barcode, and it will take you through to all of our clothing range. And of course, now we offer animations custom built for your pleasure on our store. Long range then, that second hurricane starts to die off as it heads towards Hawaii, and then we've got that third system which is even tinier and really tiny as it moves off the coast of Mexico and staying out to sea. All of this is entirely possible. Whether it happens exactly like this is a big question mark, but odds in favour of it, because you usually get a train of storms round about the end of June, especially into July, even in quieter seasons. But whether it will hold out very much, we'll see what happens there. Western Pacific, in the meantime, look at this typhoon, gets extremely strong according to the GFS, but this is extremely long range out. That's a mid-range category 4 there, moving through the Japanese Ryukyu Islands and then brushing the east coast of China as another storm forms at the very end of that sequence. But once again, it's extremely long range, and that could change at the drop of a hat. But certainly something like that could happen at this time of year. That's getting into the early part of July. It has been done before. On this day in 1990, we had Typhoon Ophelia, which was making landfall in Taiwan as a category 2, Percy had just formed further south as well in the southern Philippine Sea, and Douglas was on its way out in the eastern Pacific, having peaked as a strong tropical storm, I believe, was just moving off the coast of Mexico clearly, and started to move out to sea where conditions weren't favourable, and it perished within the day. Ophelia, though, looking good on that image from June 23rd, 1990. Back to this year, and we look at the next names on the list. If you need a refresher, Bonnie next up in the Atlantic, Darby in the Eastern Pacific, and in the Central Pacific on list 1, we still have to get through Hone. Who knows when that might be. In the Western Pacific, the next name on the list is Chaba, and if we need to go one further anytime soon, it's Airy. In the North Indian Ocean, the next name is Sitrang. So far, we've had 30 storms in 2022 at this point, which I think is slightly below average for the time. In the Australian region, the next name is Darian, Southwest Indian Ocean, Let Lama, and in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Harley. That's all for tonight. We'll have another Tropical Weather Bulletin tomorrow night.